Hello, and welcome to Real Talk with Rachel. Today I'm considering the question, does everyone deserve a voice? I've been thinking about this a lot. I believe we all have the right to the freedom of speech. But that freedom also comes with responsibilities, just like any other freedom. I know we just want to have our freedoms. We don't want to answer to anyone. But we live in a world full of people, and people can be hurt. Our freedom of speech is a right, but we don't have the freedom to say everything and anything. There are some legal limits, of course. We have a right to express our opinions and engage in debates, but we can be smacked with slander lawsuits for derogatory oral statements. Direct threats, incitements to violence, false statements that harm someone's reputation may not be protected under the right, because we don't have the right to harm or endanger others. So there's a legal precedent for this freedom. But I believe there's also a human precedent. As a human being, we should have humanitarian limits. So what are the humanitarian responsibilities that come with the freedom of speech? Here's the standard I use. Is it kind? Is it true? Does it need to be said? Let's take them one by one. Is it kind? Kind can be a subjective word, I suppose. But we all have standards for kindness, right? Kindness isn't demeaning someone else. It's not making fun of someone else in a disparaging way. It's not punching down. What I mean by punching down is it's not unfairly representing an individual or a population of people that is less privileged than you are. In America, if you're a rich, white, heterosexual man, you're pretty much on top. Anybody you disparage who's not a rich, white, heterosexual man is considered punching down. Is it true? Have you confirmed, without a doubt, that what you're about to say is true? Have you done your due diligence in making sure you're not spreading misinformation or misrepresenting someone unfairly? Do you know the difference between truth and opinion? It's worth exploring again. Because if it isn't true, unless you're writing a fiction story, it doesn't need to be said. You can make sure something's true by verifying information and fact-checking claims from multiple sources. Question sources, practice healthy skepticism, and foster evidence-based discussions. The final piece of my humanitarian responsibility is, does it need to be said? Maybe you're wavering on the kindness piece. What you want to say isn't kind, but it's not completely cruel. And maybe it's also true. But there's a last piece to this. Does it need to be said? Why do you want to say it? For attention? To rile people up? To prove a point that doesn't really need to be proved? For your own personal satisfaction? This deserves a side note. I'm not talking about helpful criticism that can change things. I'm all for criticizing things like government policies and the way things are and continue to be. Absolutely use your voice to facilitate justice and fairness. Don't back down. Here are some things to remember when we wave our freedom of speech right around to justify saying anything and everything. We need to balance our freedom and our responsibility. Even though freedom of speech is a fundamental right, society functions at its best when the people in it exercise their freedom in a responsible manner, which means considering the impact your words might have on others. Obviously, we can't always predict how people will take our words, but we can run our words through the filter I outlined earlier, and that will help. And we can examine our motives. Asking the why question is almost always helpful in most situations, this one included. Words are incredibly powerful. As a writer, I know this. I think about it every time I sit down to write. Many people don't think about it. Words have the power to lift up and the power to tear down. Words can shape opinions and perpetuate stereotypes. They can incite violence or cause social division. We have to recognize the power of our words and use that power responsibly. When we use our freedom to spew hate speech targeting individuals and groups based on their religion, gender, race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, or other characteristics, we're contributing to marginalization and discrimination. We're eroding social cohesion, and that's a big deal. Protecting those individuals and groups from the harmful consequences of hate speech is necessary for keeping our society unprejudiced and inclusive. And don't we all want to live in a world that's unprejudiced and inclusive? Here's the thing. You don't have to say anything, or you don't have to say it publicly. Or if you absolutely have to say it, you can write it in your private journal. Or, my other favorite, you can write a fiction story about it. But maybe you go ahead and say that thing. And maybe it's not completely kind. And maybe it's only possibly true. And maybe you don't care if it needs to be said or not. Well, if that's you, then I have some bad news. We aren't entitled to be heard. When we talk about voice in the question, does everyone deserve a voice? We're not just talking about the freedom of speech. We're talking about actually being heard. We deserve to say our piece, and we deserve to be heard as long as we use our freedom of speech responsibly and respectfully. So I guess the answer is yes, everyone deserves a voice. But not everyone should use their voice. We can use our voices to make the world a better place. Hate, derogatory speech, even unnecessary criticism doesn't do that. Ask yourself if what you feel like saying is kind, true, and necessary. If not, stay quiet and listen.